Hey there, I'm Sarah Zarella, a portrait and wedding photographer and your host for Wedding Secrets Unveiled. This is a podcast where we cut through the complexity of wedding planning, leaving you with everything you need to know directly from the industry experts. If you want to simplify your wedding planning while having fun, of course, you came to the right place. Join me while I guide you through your planning, starting from your engagement to your big day when you say, I do. After photographing for over 20 years, I am sharing with you tips and tricks to cut through the excess noise. Because I believe from the moment you said yes, your planning experience should be a magical time in your life. Here you'll find episodes that are fun, stress-free, and straight to the point with a fresh, honest take on the reality of what you really need to know about planning your perfect day. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. I am your host, Sarah Zarella, and we have one of our past guests back on, Elizabeth Lutz from Elizabeth Lutz Boutique Design and Event Planning. She was on episode 76. We talked about wedding design, but while we were recording that episode, we both thought it would be a perfect follow-up episode to talk about design and photography and the bridge between the two. They go hand in hand. So if you are a couple getting married or know someone who's getting married and the design component of the wedding is really important to you, and what I'm talking about with design is the lighting, the decor, your place settings, whether it's do it yourself or you hired the top-notch wedding planner designer. If any of these details are important to you, you really have to think about the other side of the spectrum, and that's photography. Photography is capturing your memories and preserving it. So here you are on your wedding day, and you are just in all your glory because you see all your hard work and money all in one room. However, it's really important to start thinking about what your images are going to look like afterwards because not every photographer photographs details, and they all don't do it the same. So today's episode is going to give you some inside tips about how to find the right photographer and the tools of how to find the right photographer for your design preserving needs. Welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. We have Elizabeth here. Welcome back, Elizabeth.
Hello.
I am so excited to have you back on air with me. You were just on episode 76 for our listeners, and we talked about wedding design. And as we were talking, we both said, epiphany, we need to have an episode about wedding design and photography.
Absolutely.
So here we are.
Here we are.
Well, for our listeners, definitely check out Elizabeth's first episode. But if you're new here, can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, who you serve, and what you do in your business?
Sure. So I am a wedding and event planner. I'm based in Southern New England, and I'm finding many don't actually know what New England entails. So I'm on the southern coast of Massachusetts, serving Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, through a full service wedding planning partnership, but I also work with couples nationwide in a design only partnership through like a virtual design offering. And that's who I am and what I do and where I'm based out of.
Yeah. And also too, for our listeners, if you are not local, Elizabeth can still work with you to cultivate your design needs. So that's
Absolutely.
Exciting.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Okay. So now today's episode, we are going to talk a little bit about just the bridge between design and photography and why it's important. And I think for the listeners, this might not be something that you even thought about. So I think it's pretty important to just bring it to everybody's attention. So with that said, let's just get right into it. We want to talk a little bit about with you all, all this time that you spend working with someone like Elizabeth and just designing, right? And correct me if I'm wrong here, but just designing their space of their dreams for their day. But, yes. Right, like that day, there's such a wonderful moment and excitement, and it's so special and enchanting to be submerged into all your planning. However, after it's said and done, your takeaway is your memories. And
yes.
To preserve those memories, it's your photos. So we see this a lot, time and time again, how important your photography is, and thinking about that portion as a step 2 from designing your space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. They're intertwined, and it's certainly not something that you can understand or even anticipate when you're doing this for the first time. It's only for us as seasoned professionals who have seen, the process from start to finish time and time again. And then we learn with every experience, and it just gets to a point where photography and design are so intertwined. And it comes from like a style. I think there's a cohesion in style. Like certain event styles usually trend towards a certain editing in photography, but these are things that couples don't know unless they have somebody who might be able to educate them. So that's kind of where we land. That's kind of what we started talking about, is how they're so intertwined, and to your point, how photography preserves the memories of all of the hard work. So how do you make sure that it's preserving it in the way that you want it to? Right?
You want it to, and you want it to, and what it looked like the day of is also two different things. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the show, because, what it looked like the day of may not be how you want to preserve it. Or if it is, how to make sure that you find that right photographer. So before we even get going, let me just kind of explain on a photography's end what we're talking about in regards to editing, right? So when you all are looking at photographers, most of you is probably just looking at the images and you just like, oh, I like it. You may not understand that there's a 2-part process. Well, there's a part process, but it can really be broken up in 2 main categories, right? Yeah. Which is the actual imagery of the capture, and then the actual output of it, which is the edit. Yeah. So, a picture's a picture, comes out of a camera. What us as a photographer does with that, quote unquote, in their editing style is what you get in hand. And there's a lot of editing styles out there. So what I take, if you can give me a raw image, and that's, photography terminology, but just an image out of the camera, what I do, unedited, that's a great, see, photographer terms is raw, but for you all, unedited. What I will do to it and what another photographer will do to it is part of the art form. And both the same image can look very different.
Yes.
So I think for today, for our listeners, what Elizabeth and I are going to be talking about is that actual editing component when it comes with your design. So with that said, there's a lot here to unveil.
A lot to unpack.
Unveil here. Okay, so first,
unveil.
Unveil.
Yes.
Right? So first and foremost, and we'll be sharing a little stories. I'll share you a story, a mishap that happened on my end. So I will be open and honest with all the listeners. But with that said, I think it's right off the bat. I think it's really important for people to understand that it's okay to let your photographer, and you should let your photographer know about certain key components. And I think for you, Elizabeth, you call it a design deck. So kind of explain that to our listeners.
Okay. Yes. So my process, regardless of which service I am contracted for, I have 3 different services. The common thread among all 3 is that they will receive a comprehensive design deck, and it's essentially design blueprint, which we spoke about in the last episode. And oftentimes, one of the few vendors that I will share that full deck with is the photographer. And it's important. This is, I suppose, unrelated to the immediate topic of kind of selecting the right photographer for editing style. So you have the images preserved in the way you want them preserved. But for me, that's what I'm getting at is how you communicate to your photographer the details that are important to you. Because a photographer may not know that, for example, you perhaps invested in a certain design element as a splurge. They will never know that unless it's communicated. And that's clearly something that you want captured. They may not know that a specific, say, cocktail napkin that had a message on it was incredibly sentimental because it was something from your very first date. Um, so by sharing the design deck with the photographer, it gives them a preview of things to shoot, and then it allows the photographer to back into their own photography timeline for the day, make sure that they have dedicated time to shoot, what needs to be captured, and then also work with me as a planner ahead of time if we need to tweak schedule in any way. So that's where the design deck is really a helpful thing. And even if you don't have a planner, even if you can communicate that with your photographer, and even just a bullet point list in an email, just something to call out. And it's really important that you're not being so micromanaging of what details to capture, but just a high level, like, these are my very 5 important areas that I spent a lot of time on. Can you please get that? And it sets them up for success because they may not know.
Yes. So there's 2 things that you said
Yep.
that I really want to highlight because that was a wealth of knowledge.
Okay, good.
But there's 2 things.
Yeah.
One was you said the word timeline, and the other you said bombard. So as a photographer, we can't work off of list. Our brain doesn't work that way. We're creating. However, minimal list we can work off of. So
right.
you just said it. Like, you don't want to be giving your now sharing a design deck, that's a different story because that's something that's shared as a photographer and as a visual. We understand it. We can look at it. We can absorb it. But what I'm saying is, as far as you don't want to give your photographer a 3-page bulletproof list of every single exact thing. That's just very overwhelming, and your photographer's going to be staring at a sheet versus watching the organic moments happen.
Yeah,
however,
it's important not to do that.
Not to do that. But it's very important to definitely communicate and share the highlights of things that are important. And like you said, there are certain aspects that there was a splurge. There's certain things that are just important. Maybe it was a do-it-yourself. Maybe it was a splurge and you upgraded your linens. But, those are the things that do not take it for granted that they know because they're not inside your brain. But by sharing them, a short list or very important, bullet points is really important because you know what? Then it goes into the next thing, which is timeline. So everything takes time. You might look at it as like, oh, it's just photographing the napkin that has, but no, we have to make sure that napkin is placed, it's set. There's other components.
The right setting for light too.
Right, setting for lights. And also too, like your venue is setting up your room. They have their whole procedure. Mm-hmm. And maybe by the time that the room is done, we might be, as a photographer, is off doing something else. Maybe it's sunset time. And so now we don't have time to go in the room. And so, but my point is we always have time to do anything that you want. It's just making the time for it. So it's really important to tell your photographer before. So therefore, they can look at their day and their flow. And if they need to tweak it, whether you have an event planner or not, or you're doing your own timeline, or your event planner is, or your photographer is, somebody needs to set aside. And I can tell you this, there has been times where I tend to get 2 types of couples. I get very heavily detailed couples because I just love details and I can capture it and I understand it, hence why we're doing an episode up like this. And then I get couples who, like, they don't have any details and decor, and that's okay too. But for those couples who have heavy decor aspects, there is some stuff that I ask them to bring with them beforehand, and I do during the quote unquote getting ready portion, the lay flats. I can stage it more. So what I mean by that is, if you have extra invitations, if you have an extra monogram or a seal or some floral components, I'll ask your florist to bring some items. My point is, when you share that list, there might be some stuff that you as the listener, and it's not your job, it's not your responsibility, but us as the designers and the photographers, we can, and we'll say to you, you know what, bring those items earlier or when you set some time to do that,
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you just have something as simple as like a shoebox or a keepsake box or something, and just have that set aside and know that this is going to your getting ready location for your photographer. Like you said, extra invitation, extra save the date, extra wax seals. If you have even a cocktail napkin, a menu, any of those paper products, then those are, to your point, much easily captured earlier in the day.
Yeah, and also too, like I've been to events where I haven't photographed the brunch or I haven't photographed the rehearsal dinner, but there's some design and decor elements that is really significant, important to them. Again, you got to talk to your photographer. Every photographer is different, but this is why we're having this episode. There are photographers out there that are willing and able to do this for you. You know, I asked them to bring those items too. Like, why not bring your menu if you spent some money or time designing it, you know, from the night before? Capture it, preserve it.
That's such a great idea.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really nice. And I think, you know, we all have reasons for saying no, and it's usually stemmed from some sort of experience that we had to learn from. And I think that it's really important to also say yes. You know, and if you can do it and it's not going to impact some other thing that you know you have to get done to deliver on the expectation, if you can say yes, that just goes a long way. I mean, at the end of the day, it is our couple's wedding days. And even though we do this as a job, I think it's really important to stay very human about it and remember that this is such a significant day for them. And so if you can give them a little gesture like, yes, I'll photograph that even though I wasn't there. I mean, to me, that's a really nice thing.
Yes. And also too, with that said, right? So we've kind of talked about laying the expectations. If you are heavily designed, you know, focused couple, it's also important to think about that when selecting your photographer in regards to how your images look. That editing style. So like I can share with you, like I there's a particular florist that always tells me she loves when she sees me on her roster of her list, because she does these magnificent floral arrangements. I mean, they're just beautiful. And she sometimes can't share the images that she has done for clients because of the photographer's editing style. In her mind, it's very important for her to show the true color of the florals, right? Because that's what she is. She's a floral designer, right? So she's promoting her florals. It may not be the same thing for the couple that's hired the photographer, but for her, she wants true to color. If that is a pink, light pink rose, she wants it light pink. Not like, you know,
yeah.
So there has been pictures that she's shared with me of these beautiful events that she's photographed all over the nation. But sometimes she can't even share them, or she can't submit them for editorial because in her mind, they don't show her work, right? True to form, right? So with that said, kind of want to go over editing now, right? So there's different types of editing. There's, you know, the saturated color. There's the light and airy. There's true to color. There's the dark and moody. And all of those editing styles are unique and beautiful in their own way. So I just think, you know, when it comes to design, though, you have to start thinking about the time and the place for those editing styles, right? Kind of makes sense there. So for me, the way that I edit, as I edit true to color, I do tend to go shy a little bit on the lighter side. If I had to say the pendulum is going to swing a little bit on the lighter side, and the only reason why I do that is because me personally, when you elevate the highlights in an image, you make skin tones just look magnificent and flawless. So who does not want to look magnificent and flawless, right? And if you go a little bit darker and moodier and a darker, it's going to bring out every blemish and wrinkle. But again, time and place. But with that said, the reason why I have decided that is going to be my editing style is because it's timeless and it stays on track to, you know, the decor. I like I said, I'm very heavy on decor. I love the design element. So with that said, the reason why I'm bringing up this whole tangent is that it's really important, if you are working with a designer, to understand what those images are going to look like after and don't dismiss it, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And that's where that was really the spinoff that we started with, is that you don't know as a couple, you're emotionally charged, you're trying to get a vendor that you like before they book up. I mean, we understand that flurry right after engagement. But there are things that you need to think deeper about. And that's something that I, as a planner, bring to the table, But if you're not a planner, if you're not working with a planner, or you have a planner who maybe just doesn't for whatever reason, this is just something Sarah and I feel so passionate about that you yourself have to be triggered to think about. So when you're looking at photography styles and editing styles, as Sarah said, there's a spectrum of editing styles. Think about how, not only how the people look, but start looking at the flowers. And, do you want your flowers to be preserved in imagery the way that it's represented in those photos? And that's a little bit hard to do, but if you really start thinking critically and start looking at portfolios of photographers, you'll start to look at it with a trained eye. So you'll start to really pick up on the different editing styles, and then that's when you're going to start to resonate with one over the other. Does that make sense?
It does. And so, like, for someone like myself and you who know the terminology and know why someone gravitates to an imagery or a decor element, we understand that. But for someone else, they may not know. But like you said, if you just start looking at portfolios, you may not know why, but you'll start to see that there is a knowledge that you have of that you are gravitating towards something.
Yes.
So I'll share, like earlier when we first started this episode, I said I was going to share a story. So I'll share a story with you, and then we're going to take a quick break. Yes. And then we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and start getting into some like practical uses of what we're talking about in regards to design and your photographer and looking at portfolios. But with that said, I'll share a quick story. And this is a disclaimer to all the listeners out there, okay? Because you cannot do this to me, all right? But I shared with you how I edit, and just the way I edit does not mean it's right or wrong. It's just how I edit, right? So right.
I think that's important because you as a photographer, and all photographers are artists, so that you're being hired for that reason, like your skill of producing photography, but you're also the artist, and that's why people choose different editing styles. But that's also what I don't think that everybody understands, that it's not necessarily common knowledge. So that's where this story is so applicable.
Right. So I had a client that her whole design element of her entire wedding was very boho. Okay. She got married in a garden. I mean, everything, her dress, her decor, her details, the tent, everything was boho style. So I photographed a lot of boho weddings. Just because it's boho doesn't mean that the editing has to be a certain way. I mean, if you already have a muted design palette at your wedding, it's going to capture muted. However, with this particular client, 2 weeks before her wedding, she sent me, like we talked about, a list, right? So instead of sending me a list, she just sent me like her design board, right? Of just things that she's pulled to design for her wedding, and just poses that she liked that, I don't need to exactly copy, but she just wants to give me the vibe of inside her head, right? I welcome that. However, I was looking at it as like her wedding design, which every single couple usually sends me something like this, either a list or some type of visual. With this particular client, though, I noticed right off the bat that not only was she sending me design components, but the actual editing of each image, like the 20 or 30 images that she sent me, they all were edited dark and moody. All of them. There's a difference. Just because it was boho doesn't mean it has to be dark and moody editing. But she was not just sending me that. And I read off the bat, my heart sank, because I knew that you talked about looking at a portfolio. She may not have realized what she sent me, but I realized it. And I knew that my editing style does not match this. So what does one do, right? Like if it was a year out, 6 months out, I would have helped her find another photographer. But we were 2 weeks out. So disclaimer, I will never do, and this, like, I will not do this. Don't think I'll do this for you all out there. But I had to do it for her because I had to make her happy. I changed my editing style. And for her particular wedding, I edited it dark and moody. I gave her 2 sets. I gave her one set the way I normally edit and one set the dark and moody. And I will not blog this wedding and I will not show it on Instagram, not because I don't love her and everything like that. I just don't want to show that style of editing because that's not what I do. But I've noticed what she shares on Instagram and Facebook, they're actually the set of the dark and moody. So I made the right choice for her. She left as a very happy camper, and she has her dark and moody imagery, but it just wasn't to my style. But the reason why I'm bringing this story up is because, again, it's all about a vibe and the takeaway. So if I produce that dark and moody imagery to my other clients, they would not love it, right? For my clients, right? Because I'm desaturating the colors. I'm taking colors out. I am darkening things, and there's almost like an orangey brown tint to things. And for people who've put so much time and effort and preserving that memory, it's not preserving it true to what it was that day. But for her, you know, it was important for that style. So she should have really hired a photographer that had an editing style for her. And the reason why I'm sharing this story is even when I sent it to her and I told her and I had a dialogue with her and I had to pick her up the phone and give her a hard conversation with her, the conversation went lovely because, you know, I had a solution for her. But her comment was, oh, I didn't even realize that. She didn't know, because how is she supposed to know? But that's the thing. What we're trying to tell you guys is don't be her. Don't get stuck in this situation. So just look at portfolios.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, as a planner, you're privy to many, many conversations from clients to vendors to families. And you really, I suppose, have the luxury of understanding several different viewpoints because of our position and our role in the planning process. And I just can't tell you how many times it has come up. Can I ask them to change the editing style? And that goes back to before you kicked off with that story, talking about hiring the photographer as the artist. That is a form of art that they have chosen to produce. You have chosen, to your point, true to color with an edge towards maybe light and airy versus the other direction. And so someone can't hire you because they love you, they fell in love with you, you're an amazing person, your photography is beautiful, but they want the darker images. It's out of line to ask you to change that, because that's not what you do, and couples don't know that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that is something that comes up frequently. And there's only one photographer in all of my, since 2008 years, has told me he actually has a couple different editing styles, and the couple can pick, and that really stuck out to me. That was really, really cool, but very unique to him.
Correct. I know exactly who you're talking about. I know, and they have the different editing styles, and like you said, that's unique to them. And yeah, I did this.
That's their form of art,
right? And I did this too. And that's awesome. And I did that for this particular client because I needed to make her happy, and I am fully capable of producing that art. It's just not what feeds my soul, right? Yeah. So my point is, the takeaway before we take a quick break is look at portfolios, because your style is out there. You just have to know how to find it. Yes. You
have to know how to find it. So we're trying to give you the tools to be an educated, person looking at these portfolios.
Yes. And also too, just leaving you with this, the photographer that you're talking about who does the two styles, it's interesting because if you go on their website, you'll literally see, remember I was talking about that one image and how you produce it. You'll see this one image. They'll show you the two differences, and it can look so different. Just the editing style.
Yeah, so different. Yep, so much more. We have another second half of the show.
All right, so we'll take a quick break and we'll come right back. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you like what you're hearing, I encourage you to check out our website at sarahzarella.com. And don't forget, you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And I would so appreciate if you left a fabulous review on Apple Podcast. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support. And now, let's get back to the episode. All right, well, welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. Before the break, Elizabeth and I were diving deep in the world of design and photography. And listen, I could talk all day about this. It gets me excited. This is literally what we do all day. It's, we have to marry the two. We have to understand what we're working with, and we want you just to have the tools for complete success. So we talked a little bit about portfolios and looking at editing styles and looking at portfolios and making sure you're just aware of the differences out there. But now, Elizabeth, what about I broke down photography, which is the actual image capture, and then the editing. But what about the image capture in regards to design?
As a planner, one of the most difficult things to do in the initial stages. It becomes very evident in the mid to later stages. In the initial stages, to communicate the importance of design and how that might be captured on the wedding day, because the initial thought when you're planning your wedding is I need to book my vendors, I have to figure out my timeline, I have to figure out my budget, I have to figure out my venue, I have to pick my date. They're all very logistical left brain tasks. And that comes naturally, even as event planners. When we're first starting out, at least I can speak for me, but I think it's fairly common, the creative comes second. So even as you're starting as a planner, you have to master those logistics and timeline skills before you can open up your brain to master the creativity. And that doesn't mean you're not creative along the way. It just means you haven't gotten to a point of mastery. There's a very different, there's a different skill set, and you can actually dive deep. There's benchmarks to claim kind of mastery, and it's like 10,000 hours worth of work in that category. That's a whole different discussion.
Actually, I'm going to totally interrupt you and hijack your thought for a hot second here. I am so on your wavelength right now. I tell people all the time, if I could just do photography, just go out and photograph, right? I would be 10 times better photographer I am. I have to wear so many hats. I have to have the business side, working with people, the timelining, and also to the creativity. And I just tell people, like, one of the reasons why I've been in this career for 22 years, I've seen photographers come and go. I've seen photographers get burned out. I've seen people go out of business. I'm still here, still standing. It's just a delicate balance of both sides of the brain. You have to tap into both. And most of the wedding professionals that are successful are doing just that. And it's hard for some people.
Yeah, it is hard. And it does take time to get there. And so I guess I went on a little bit of a tangent, but to come back to the beginning, it's very hard as a couple and as a mother and a father to understand the importance of the design aspects, because when you're first looking at things, there's a huge education curve on budget. And it doesn't matter how much you think you want to spend, at every level there's an education curve, because things are they're shockingly expensive when you don't work in this industry. And there's no real education out there to really help you. Like, they're all fictitious budget numbers because they're directly tied to what your expectations are.
And also they're directly tied to they're indirectly tied to your elements at your wedding. That's the other thing.
Yeah. And those are your expectations, right? So what I'm getting at is, it's not going to be a logical step to choose a photographer, which you're securing in those initial logistical left brain stages. It's not going to be logical in your brain to, in essence, kind of scrutinize each portfolio in the way of, are they capturing details that you will want, how you will want them preserved. So it's, again, full circle to choosing a photographer in a two-prong approach. Are they providing images that are your keepsakes in the editing style that you like, meaning the tones, and are they also presenting a gallery in the capture, is capturing the things that are ultimately going to be important to you? So if you have even an inkling of interest in design and details, you should be looking through a portfolio and seeing if you resonate with how they capture your tabletop, your place setting, your escort card display, the whole room shot. That's one that is very often an oversight, unfortunately. Do you see a full room shot? Is it not just those finer details? And so that, and then of course, what is logical, do you like how they're capturing the couples, the energy of the day? Like, is that all resonating with you? And if that's all resonating with you, then take it one step further and start looking at how they capture details. And do they capture details? Some photographers, and this is a question that you should ask them, what is your approach to photography? What do you capture? And just let them speak freely And Sarah, you can tell me how to fine tune that question and make me a better planner. But, there are going to be photographers like Sarah, like you, who love the details and understand that that's an extension of who you are because you put so much effort into it. And so you need to find a photographer who understands and appreciates the details, and not someone who finds it more of a burden because they really want to capture things in a different way because that's their art form. Right.
Or like photographers who want to capture the emotion more. And I'm not saying that I don't capture emotion, but, I guess my takeaway for this.
Like you do both.
Right. And not everybody does. And I'm not saying that
one does.
Yep. And not saying that one's better than the other. But like my takeaway for this is, I post a lot of pictures. So I post every single wedding that we photograph, right? I don't post certain ones for certain reasons, except for one. Obviously, you all know the one wedding I've not posted.
We know the one.
But we post every wedding. And I post images that the viewers would want to see. So, like, for example, details. Like, who doesn't want to see what someone did on their bouquet or someone did for their table settings or their place settings or their bar? Because it gives them their like, inspiration, right? I post pictures of the couple because who doesn't want the couple because they can envision themselves being that couple and what I do. What I noticed one time is I wasn't posting pictures enough. I shy away from family photos and I shy away from the party because I was thinking, okay, who wants to see Auntie Joe or mom or dad? That's special for that person and that wedding. And I was remembering where the platform was. The platform is the blog. So the viewers on the blog are other potential couples, right? Or people who are getting married who want ideas, right? But I failed to forget that there's also the readers who are looking into hiring me. And I actually had one person ask me, do you photograph? You stay at the reception? Do you photograph the reception?
Interesting.
I was like, yes, I do. And I realized, and I shifted quickly, and I started blasting all these pictures of people dancing and having a good time and all the emotion. I forgot to post the pictures of the party. And I was so focused on people giving them inspiration and ideas and just seeing my portfolio that I forgot that, there's a whole other component, and that's the party, and that's the excitement, and that's the fun, and that's the candids. So my whole point of my story is, yes, I do both. And there's some photographers who don't do both. So that legit question was legit because to answer your question of how as a planner could you do, there is no other magic way. You just flat out ask somebody. Because my answer could have been, no, I don't. I leave. I know photographers who leave right after the cake is cut, Right. I know some photographers who don't photograph details. It's a pain in the butt for them. Details are a pain in the butt to photograph.
They take a lot of time.
Yes.
That's why they need to be accounted for in the timeline.
Yep. And I know some photographers who are photojournalistic. That's a photography term. But with that said, they're very high-end photographers and they just focus on these unbelievable moments. And they get these moments that are just like, oh, they're split of a second. But they're not photographing the details because they're too focused on the moments. But that is for somebody. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just really is a conversation to be had. And it's just about giving your viewers just a little inkling of education so they're not going in so blind, because nobody likes to go into a conversation blind. And these are investments that you're making. Weddings are not inexpensive. And so what other decisions in your life do you make without education? Really none. You can search on the internet how to buy a car, whether it's accurate information or not. We all have to be savvy enough to try to sniff out correct information on the internet, but there's just not a ton about weddings. And buying a car is so much more straightforward than a wedding. Like the price range of cars only ranges X to X. Like buying a wedding can range from $10,000 to $1 million, $3 million, $5 million plus. Like that is such a huge range. That you just need these little inklings, because that question is important at every level. And if you're in those upper budget categories, you're working with a planner, but that's something that you need to bring to your planner's attention if details are important to you. They need to know that so they can give you the right match for vendor suggestions.
Right. And also talking with a planner or the planner talking to the couple and saying like, what is important for your takeaway? Like, so,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay. Yep.
what is your takeaway that you want to take away in regards to photography, obviously? And if
Right.
they, and as a planner, if you listen to what they're saying, right, then you can help them match up to the photographer, and you can do the heavy lifting for them with just asking the photographers, like, do you do this? Do you do that? Do you do this? And just understanding that there's differences of photographers who do and don't assume, right? Because when you start to assume things, that's when you run into regrets and problems, right? I mean, it
You
just is
do.
what it is. It is what it is. You know, if that like,
Totally.
going back to that story, if that bride did not send me that inspiration board, I never would have caught the editing style. Now, it was a fluke that
In
this
22
happened.
years, it was
Right.
a one.
It
It
was
was a one.
right. It was a one-off. But my point is, she didn't know enough to, I mean, she's not in this industry, right? So she didn't know enough to research. She just, I did a friend's wedding and she saw the pictures and she loved it. And so my point is, she wouldn't have had a bad experience, not because she
Yeah.
didn't enjoy working with me. It's the takeaway, right?
Yeah. It's the takeaway.
Right. So I guess my point is, for the listeners, the takeaway, or the, you know, for yourself, like an event planner, is just understanding what is important as a takeaway and then asking those questions
Yeah.
beforehand.
Yes. Yeah. So well said. And that is our entire goal with this idea of hosting, of covering this topic, was how to set you up in a way that your takeaway is going to be what you want and you're not going to be disappointed.
So with that said, Elizabeth, it's time for our wrap-up question. What are some key points that couples should be asking their photographer to make sure they are capturing their details and decor to preserve their takeaway with no regrets?
Okay. All right. So one of the questions you can start with is, can you share with me your editing style? And key things you're going to want to listen for in that open-ended response is specifically color correcting, color touching. Do they lend towards the light and airy? Do they lend towards true to color? Do they lend towards more dark and moody? And you can use those terms because those are terms that your photographer is going to relate to. So you can ask further questions using those terms if you need to clarify their first response. The second question you could give is, how do you like to approach the day in regards to photographing details? And you're going to, again, this is for you if you are a details and decor focused person and you know you want that captured during your day as much as you want the human emotion captured. If you don't care about details, then these questions don't need to be asked. And let your photographer that you're interviewing speak to you about how they photograph the details. And you're going to start to get a feel of the importance. And if they're making it a priority in the day and they already have a structure to their day because they're used to making time to capture these details, then you know that you're probably in the right place and you should keep going with conversations. And then the third question is, how involved do you get with timelines and working with event and decor specialists or planners to ensure details are captured? And this is important because a photographer who is an artist that captures details as well as human emotion will want to get into your reception room and photograph at a specific time, likely before water glasses are filled, before the butter dishes are put on the table. They're just going to have certain things that they know make the details really shine in a way that somebody who's maybe not accustomed to that. And those are kind of next level details, frankly. But I just think anything that you can listen for in those responses that help resonate that this person has a plan, they understand the importance of details, and they're going to make sure your day is set up in a way that they're going to preserve the memories in the way that you want. That's really what you're looking for. So those are 3 questions to get you started in those conversations.
Right. And, those are great questions. And like you said, perfectly stated, those are next level questions. So really, I'm assuming for you listeners, if you've listened to this whole episode and you're at the wrap-up question, decor is very important to you. So, or aesthetics, or just preserving your day. And so these questions, I think Elizabeth is spot on with them. They are next level, but they are the perfect questions. They're open-ended. They're getting a dialogue, and there's no right and there's no wrong, because what is going to happen by asking these questions, you're going to listen and you're going to resonate, or you're not. And it's and that this is just a tool to understand if this is right or wrong for you, because you are not a photographer, you're not an event planner, you're not a designer. So you and even if you are, you're one of them, right? You're not both. So you got to figure out, this is just a tool to make sure that you don't end up my boho bride. That I get everything re-edited.
But a happy bride.
Yes.
I think that speaks volumes to you as a professional, where you could have handled that in any number of situations, and you handled it like a professional because you wanted her to be happy.
Oh, absolutely.
And what we do.
Absolutely. That's first and foremost. There's no egos here. I could check my ego at the door and edit the way that I knew she was going to, but that's the key. That's the whole point of this show, is there's different styles. So just know that, put that in the back of your pocket. So with that said, Elizabeth, I want to thank you so much for joining me again on this week's episode of Wedding Secrets Unveiled. You helped our listeners become, once again, one step closer to a stress-free wedding planning. Can you tell everybody where they could find you?
Sure. And thank you, Sarah. It's always so fun to chat with you. I can be found on the web, elizabethlutz.com, Instagram, Elizabeth Lutz Design, and Pinterest, which is Elizabeth Lutz. I think that's relatively new, but I think if you put Elizabeth Lutz Design, it'll come up.
I love it.
It's terrible.
No, it's not. Listen, everything's evolving, right? That's the
Everything's
whole way.
evolving. Yes.
That's the whole thing. We got to keep ourselves fresh. So with that said, for our listeners, I will have Elizabeth's information on our episode show notes, which you can find on our blog and also on our website page, which is at sarahzarella.com/podcast. Thank you for listening to Wedding Secrets Unveiled. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you something. I encourage you to check out our website at sarahzarella.com. We love photographing while having fun, of course. Check out our podcast page on our website for our show notes, along with upcoming episodes with your local wedding experts. Listen in as we help you plan your epic event. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening, so you never miss an episode. I would so appreciate if you left a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support, and let us know what you think. If you know any wedding experts that would like to be a guest, we have a link directly on our website where they can let us know. Thank you for listening.